This is Jerome Corsi, and today is Tuesday, May 30th, 2023. We're just finished with the Memorial Day holiday. I hope everyone had a great holiday, and I hope everyone remembered to celebrate our troops and all that have been done in the many wars to defend the nation. And those at Arlington Cemetery are to be honored, and were honored by President Trump. And I am pleased to see that there is patriotism yet alive in America in this era in which we're going through disinformation, questioning of reality, alternative lifestyles, and a culture war, all of which I think are completely destructive. Anyway, we've got a lot to cover today, and I want to jump into the first story, which is on the climate issue. It looks like we're going to see a shifting here where El Nino is coming back. Now, this is a complicated issue in terms of the climate, but El Nino is a particular, these are ocean currents, and the Pacific's transitioned away from La Nina, which is when a band of cold water forms off the coast of South America, and is basically we have the El Nino coming up, which is warm water emerging instead coming up the coast, which means that El Nino will arrive in the next few months with a 55% chance of being a particularly strong event. This could shift global temperatures 1.5 degrees Celsius around the world. The Paris Agreement is going to go bonkers because this is not caused by carbon dioxide. This is caused by simply ocean currents. Now, I'm sure we're going to be seeing all kinds of climate alarmism because typically the economic consequences of this El Nino are pretty dramatic. They could be as high as $3 trillion over the next several years, with low-income tropical countries getting hit especially hard. An article in the journal Science determined that the El Ninos of 1982 to 83, and 1997 to 98 led to worldwide losses of 4.1 trillion and 5.7 trillion respectively, which dragged on for more than 5 years after the climactic events had dissipated. So by the end of the century, the cumulative bills for El Ninos could come to $84 trillion. Now, this is because you do get a lot of rain, an enormous amount of rain on the West Coast. Other parts of the world, like Pakistan, tend to have long dry periods. The El Nino waters warm in the Pacific, and the tropical countries bear the bulk of the knockout effects. Peru, in particular, tends to suffer heavy rainfall during an El Nino, which damages infrastructure and waterlogs crops. And this effect will also hit the drought in the Amazon rainforest. It's going to have dramatic effects across the world. Now, I'm sure as soon as this happens, we're going to be seeing global warming, and global warming is causing El Nino. That's complete nonsense. The El Nino, La Nina effects have been going on in the ocean currents for centuries. The point I make, if people would take the trouble to read what I've written and others have written in this book, The Truth About Global Warming, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, you'll see that carbon dioxide is not the control knob of Earth's temperature. It's a silly idea. And the true nature of the climate is extremely complex. And ocean currents have a lot more to do with Earth's temperature and the dramatic weather effects than do a little bit more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is actually probably a good thing because it stimulates the growth of plants. Plants absorb carbon dioxide, and this entire climate change movement I've been exposing on thetruthcentral.com is a anti-capitalist neo-Marxist movement. It's really aimed to destroy the ability of capitalism to function. Without hydrocarbon fuels, we're going to suffer a much lower standard of living. And by the way, there's a very good article that was out today by Victor David Hansen, who is pointing out that we are putting all these huge wind and solar farms in desert areas. California is doing an enormous amount of it. And this wrecks the environment again. It's detrimental to the environment. We're taking farmland and putting solar panels on it. These take enormous amounts of territory because solar is not powerful enough to provide the energy that hydrocarbon fuel does to power a city or any major metropolitan area. And so we're finding that, and I think the reality is that people are beginning to wake up to realize that if you can't have dishwashers, we're going to have electric vehicles. And by the way, I saw some reports over the holiday of the suppressed electric vehicle fires that are being caused by these batteries. The electric vehicles have a lot of problems to them, which are largely ignored in the media. But at any rate, I think the key theme I want to make sure everyone understands at this point is that we are not in a climate crisis so much as in an age of disinformation crisis in which reality is being altered to reconstruct the so-called science of climate into a narrative about carbon dioxide that goes back to the post-war era when the Malthusians, like Paul Ehrlich, who said there's too many people, we got to reduce population because we're using up the Earth's resources, joined with John Holdren, who was later Obama's science czar, and said, well, let's make it a really existential threat. That if people don't stop using hydrocarbon fuels, which emit carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, well, then we're all either going to freeze or we're going to have excessive heat. First, they thought we'd freeze. When that didn't work, they switched to global warming. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC of the UN, followed right along, and is now saying if we don't achieve net zero emissions of carbon by 2050, we're all going to die. Well, it's just absurd. And it has nothing to do. There's another article which I was going to report, except it's a little bit complicated. But what the scientists have found is that the ice caps, some of these polar ice caps, are actually 8 times thicker than they were in the Holocene, which means that we are not getting a melting of the ice caps. And a lot of the science, all the fear science that was propagated by Al Gore in his Inconvenient Truth, has not happened. Despite that, we continue to have the climate change narrative be politically correct around the world and extremely destructive. If we could go to nuclear power, we would be able to do much more, providing cheap, available energy, almost unlimited. We wouldn't have to worry about this silly solar, wind, battery nonsense. They do generate some electricity, but it is an ineffective technology to power modern industrial society, and those behind the global warming movement know it. They're still propagating it, knowing that all they're going to do is destroy our standard of living. Now, let me cover 2 stories here on the economy. I was very interested in the study that just came out it was a study done by the UBS, which is one of the major banks, that is said that 2,000 stores have closed in the last 12 months, according to a recent report by UBS retail analyst Michael Lasser. But that's just the beginning. He's projecting that we will have as many as 50,000 U.S. stores closing by 2027. Now, this is not just because of the economic slowdown, which I'm going to cover in a moment, but it's also a combination of the online shopping and the fact that our urban areas are getting extremely dangerous. homelessness, the lack of the ability to provide police, the lack of safety. I mean, these narratives of defund the police, all these neo-Marxist narratives are against common sense. How are you going to have a large metropolitan area ruled by mediators when, in fact, all you're going to do is encourage roving gangs, which is happening, to destroy retail areas, to destroy cities, to have mob attacks, random attacks, which rage through downtowns, injuring people and destroying property. If the cities become unsafe, and largely democratic cities, what we're going to see is another major hit on the U.S. economic strength. And it seems to me that we're in the process right now of deconstructing America in order to be considerably weaker. The second story here on the Old Navy closing in San Francisco. For those of you who know San Francisco, I'm not sure how many really know San Francisco, but it was a beautiful city. Well, now you've had this year Nordstrom, which was one of the kind of bedrock stores in San Francisco, and it started in Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco had some of the original Nordstroms. And now you're going to see Old Navy, which is, again, another Bay Area store that is shuttering its flagship store in San Francisco July 1 after nearly 3 decades, mostly because they are not getting the traffic in the downtown area. They are just, they've been on Market Street. And when the lease expires, they're just simply going to move. Gap also has deep roots in San Francisco, but our Gap is also considering, they recently invested in renovating their store downtown San Francisco, but essentially they're also evaluating whether or not they need to stay. So you've had major brands, Old Navy, Gap, Banana Republic, etc., are all looking at plans to either close their stores in San Francisco or change locations. At the same time, got Coldwell Banker saying that the vacancy rate in San Francisco hit 29.4%. And I've been predicting that we're going to get a massive commercial real estate collapse the next few months in the United States. What that's going to do is produce bank failures because the commercial real estate loans will default or have to, the banks will have to be refinanced. Refinancing these businesses, someone's going to have to take a loss on the existing loans. And the banks will suffer if their asset quality goes down. And it's a good transition. I want Chris to comment in a minute, but please take a look. We've just coming out. We did last week. This is the new book we've got. I've written it with Dean Heskin. Dean is the CEO of Swiss America, how the coming global crash will create an historic gold rush. I'm saying what we're going into economically is going to be a very, very difficult time. This book outlines what's going to happen. It'll allow you to prepare for it, but it's going to be a complex international collapse where the United States dollar is going to be in demise. We're having a massive, massive amount of federal spending, trillions and trillions of dollars. I'm going to cover that in a minute because it looks like the debt ceiling issue, looks like Kevin McCarthy caved on the debt ceiling issue, and we're going to allow the debt just to keep going, more trillions spent that we don't have, which will continue to stimulate inflation. At the same time, I'm not convinced that we won't have a Fed rate increase again. Please take a look at the book. If you want to prepare yourself to understand how this is going to impact, especially as the BRIC nations, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America, meet early in June in South Africa, not South America, South Africa, and admit other countries, including Iran. They will challenge the dollar. The dollar is going to lose its position as the world's reserve currency, which is going to make life more difficult here in the United States. Chris, would you like to comment?
Well, I agree with you. I do want to point out that you can pick up the book right from our website, too, thetruthcentral.com. It's right here in the books section. You have Dr. Corsi's books right here. You can stick it down here. You can hit the buy the book button here. It takes you right to Amazon. That's where you can pick it up, either paperback or Kindle right now. So if you like to have the book in hand, read it, pick up the paperback. If you want to stick it on your laptop or your Kindle or whatever the Fire, things like that, your Etch-a-Sketch, whatever the kids use these days, you can always download Kindle.
It does explain the economics to you. It shows that the last two crashes we had, the 1970s and 2008, 2009, with the subprime real estate market failing, gold doubled in price. And I think we're going to look back and see that gold today is actually cheap. And it won't happen immediately, but as this crisis develops and deepens, you'll see gold increase in value. Also, Chris might point out too, we're on the website how you can see all the different places where we're broadcasting right now. Okay.
Let's do that. You can find basically what you do is go to the website, thetruthcentral.com. You can find where our program is playing, whether it be audio podcasts or video podcasts. You can find our Rumble channel, YouTube channel on video. We're on all sorts of audio outlets, from Amazon Prime or Amazon Music to Google to Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever you get those audio podcasts. Or make it really easy. Come to the Truth Central website. Click this play button here. You can get our immediate feed, Spreaker feed. Absolutely easy. You can do that and also find our past programs at any of these channels as well.
And past articles, and take a look at the tabs. Please take a look at our sponsors. And we now do have a store. I'm very happy to get my logo here. This is I think the best logo we've ever had. Okay, let's return back to the news. The next couple stories I think are also extremely important right now. I'm watching the Ukraine war. I think we're entering into a last phase of the Ukraine war. I expect the counterattack by Ukraine against Russia, this much touted spring counterattack, to fizzle and fail. I don't think it's going to be particularly successful. Over the weekend, the holiday weekend, Russia has now begun attacking Kiev, or Kyiv, or however the left wants to pronounce this today. And that's the end game. If Russia takes the capital of Ukraine, the Zelensky government will have to go into exile. And our embassy will be closed. NATO's position will be thrown out of Ukraine. I think that's Russia's goal. Russia took last week this critical city of Bakhmut, which was a bloody fight. But Russia destroyed the city. Shelled it and destroyed the city. First, they made sure there was no infrastructure. They cut off the water, they cut off the electricity, cut off the internet, and they started bombarding the residential buildings, these big apartment buildings. They bombed the roads, they bombed the highways, and basically made the city uninhabitable. Well, they can do the same. Russia can do the same now to Kiev. And when they do so, I think NATO will have to stand by and watch. Now, also, you've got Zelensky and NATO and the United States saying, well, we're going to keep this a proxy war. We're really fighting Russia at this point through Ukraine, providing them Ukraine weapons, advanced systems. I don't think F-16s and the like are going to make any difference to Ukraine. It's too late. Russia has the ability simply to destroy the city when they decide to do so. And it was reported yesterday that there was a drone attack in Moscow. Some residential buildings were hit in Moscow. Now, if Ukraine begins striking at Russia, including territorial advances into Russia, last week, Putin moved tactical nuclear weapons into Belarus. Putin is not going to lose, as Russia has a nation-state interest in having a buffer, this whole area of influence, which is really Eastern Europe and Ukraine. And as I constantly point out, Russia wants, as a nation-state, access to the Atlantic Ocean through Ukraine, Black Sea, and through Finland in the north, the Baltic Sea. And Russia covets the natural resources of Ukraine. Ukraine has been a fought over place for centuries, and it's divided. The eastern part of Ukraine is pro-Russian. The western part of Ukraine is pro-German, and the units fighting for Zelensky are actually Nazi prototype units with Nazi-like symbols, Nazi-like rhetoric. So there's a lot of misreporting again and disinformation in the United States about this war. And I wonder if the American people are really paying attention. But again, I think it's a critical dynamic going on because this is how essentially World War II got started, which was a series of Nazi German movements into the Sudetenland and taking over Austria, and then finally attacking Poland in 1939. And the war didn't start overnight. The United States didn't enter the war until December 1941 when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. It takes a while for these wars to build, but it's not going to stop until Russia wins. And NATO is going to have a massive defeat here, I'm predicting. And I think it's inevitable because Putin cannot stand politically to lose this war or he'll lose his power. It's really that simple. So we're going to follow this very carefully. Also, I see Taiwan is asking now for the U.S. nuclear umbrella of protection in case China attacks. Well, the idea that we're going to go to nuclear war over Ukraine or Taiwan is unfortunately possible, but insanely ridiculous. And the whole idea that we could defend Ukraine or launch a massive war against Russia over Ukraine is again preposterous because Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And all this billions of dollars we're sending in aid that Biden is shoveling over there with the Biden family history of having been corrupt and cashing in a lot of that aid over the years, reported extensively on that. It's insane. So the looting is going on and the war is expanding. Now, the next story also, OPEC, which there's a meeting coming up, as I mentioned, in June, first week in June, which is just around the corner in South Africa, of the BRIC nations. And Iran wants to join, along with several of the OPEC countries, wants to join the BRIC nations. Now, this started out really as Brazil, India, Russia, China. South Africa came in as well, but that was the major coalition. In other words, they were kind of underdeveloped economies, but they were emerging economies. Well, now OPEC wants to join. And OPEC is saying here that they welcome the return of Iran to the international oil market once the U.S. lifts sanctions from Tehran. So there's expectation the Biden administration, John Kerry has been behind this a lot. John Kerry, my friend from Unfit for Command, which I co-authored with John O'Neill, 2004, the Swift Boat campaign. And what's happening, I think, is if Iran joins the OPEC nations and resumes active involvement in the oil market, you're going to see Russia and India and China, the BRIC nations, benefiting, and Iran's going to get the revenue they need in order to expand terrorism. Iran will set its sights on Syria. Iran is actively in the process of creating its own nuclear weapons arsenal. When they achieve what they consider to be their threshold, I'm sure that Iran will carry out its plans to, as they have threatened to do for decades, launch a nuclear attack against Israel. Been working on this and writing a book on it. I wrote 3 books on Iran. First one was in 2006. It was called Atomic Iran. And what I foresaw back then is happening now. By the way, I'm mentioning swift boats. There is an interesting article up on the Epoch Times, which indicates that they're now saying basically that Hillary was swift boating Trump when she concocted this Russian collusion narrative to try to demean Trump and to cover up the fact that her emails had been stolen from the Democratic National Committee, and they were going to be very damaging to Hillary. Hillary also had a private server in her home and outside the State Department classified system, which she maintained, and there were no consequences to Hillary. The Clintons were also running the Clinton Foundation, which I wrote a book called Partners in Crime, which was a fraudulent foundation. They never got assessed. The Department of Justice will not investigate Democrats. Department of Justice today is completely political. I just think it's interesting to see this swift boating. There's going to be evidently a site, swiftboatingamerica.com, and I guess there's going to be a book on exposing the fraud of Russiagate, from the Moscow P-tape to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And those were, of course, a fraudulent document that was written to demean Jews. So swift boating, and I co-authored the book with John O'Neill, Unfit for Command, Swift Boat Veterans Speak Up Against John Kerry. And swift boating became, at that time, for those of you who remember, a major theme of the 2004 campaign, which ultimately defeated John Kerry, with us exposing in that book John Kerry's fraudulent medals, his activity in Vietnam, which was less than honorable, yet his campaigning as if he were a war hero. Also, his determination to, even in 2004, he was saying we should allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. John Kerry's played a major role in Obama's fraudulent deal with Iran. We sent them airplanes full of money. This is ridiculous. But at any rate, I played a major role in the swift boating. It's interesting. I was reflecting this morning on my book on Silent No More, which I took out and took a look at again, which I wrote when I was under, if you recall, this is Silent No More. The Mueller prosecutors, I was 40 hours before them. I like their last witness. They thought I had a tie to Julian Assange, and this was going to complete their case. Because if I had a tie to Julian Assange, then I told Roger Stone, and he told Trump, and Trump could then time the release of these emails, maybe even participate in helping him steal them. That was one of their theories of the Department of Justice, but at least influence the release of these emails to defeat Hillary Clinton in the final days in October 2016 in the 2016 presidential campaign. Now, I did not have a source to Julian Assange. I did figure out on my own that Assange had stolen Podesta's emails, and I did tell Roger Stone about that. But again, I had no source for it or basis for it, other than I was certain it was the case, and it did turn out to be the case. Now, the Department of Justice then said I was lying. I wouldn't give them my source. I was trying to hide my source. They wanted me to they gave me a plea deal. They were going to indict me for lying, which puts you under an enormous amount of pressure. In other words, you go to jail for the rest of your life if you don't take the plea deal, because they'll bring you before a jury in Washington that will certainly hate you and convict you for a very severe prison sentence. Well, I refused to take their plea deal. I couldn't swear before God and a judge to a lie. I didn't have a source, and I wasn't going to say I had a source. If the Department of Justice had broken me, they would have made their case against Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, I think, knows that. This book, I explained in this book what that ordeal was like. It's not a very thick book, but it's a very powerful book if you want to understand the pressure that this Department of Justice is politically placing on anyone who supports Donald Trump. I want to kind of wrap up here. Chris, I'm going to let you make a comment here at the end, or ask you to make a comment. But first, show our sponsors, especially the Swiss America. Please take a look at this Swiss America. It's under sponsors. Pull down our sponsors. Swiss America. And the Swiss America is the Walking Liberty $50, which these coins are not minted any longer. They're about 90% silver. It's a first-time introductory offer. If you fill out this form, Swiss America will contact you, and you can buy up to 250 of these coins at virtually what they're worth today in their value is silver. I think silver will actually appreciate faster than gold because it costs less today, much less. But this is a great offer. And Swiss America, I've worked with since 2004. They're a very reputable company. If you've got an IRA or 401k, they can help you put that into gold, which is a much better way to preserve your purchasing power and to do it within the rules so you don't get disqualified, your 401k or your IRA, from income tax deferral. Also, Matt McMillan does annuities. It's going to be my son-in-law here in August. He does annuities and universal life index products. They are yielding very high right now because interest rates are high. And if you fill out this form, Matt will call you and personally guide you through your alternatives. You can get an old IRA, an old 401k, an old annuity, an old universal life policy, and switch them, especially the annuities and universal life with the 1035 exchange, into a modern, higher yielding annuity without paying any tax considerations whatsoever. Finally, we have a new sponsor, which is Decisions Technology. We did a broadcast with Eric Smith as a revolutionary technology, which allows you to rank and score your mutual funds against all others to see if your advisor told you the truth or not. And we'll be doing more shows with Eric. We'll be doing more shows with our sponsors. And we'll have on the web pages for the sponsors, we're going to be posting some of these shows. Also on other social media, we'll be posting in separate sections what we're doing. I'm also going into the telemedicine. We'll shortly be launching GetLongevityMeds.com with My Vital C. My Vital C is people saying I'm looking younger. My hair is color again. I'm utilizing the My Vital C products. And Chris is doing a great job here following through and showing them to you. And please try these. It's a revolutionary, I think, miracle molecule, carbon-60, which has longevity principles. And these come in olive oil, which I like, avocado oil, and coconut oil. And also, they're available for dogs and cats who our pets love it. I think if you'll try them, you'll find that you won't want to be without My Vital C. Chris, any final comments?
The one way to handle this situation with Iran and OPEC and what's going on with the ever stronger oil cartel and the fact that these countries are doing some business with Russia is to produce our own energy at this point and explore nuclear energy. Those are the two ways we can stop these people from rendering the West at their mercy when it comes to fossil fuel production. But U.S. and Canada will not do that for some reason. We have the means, and they will not do that. Either you follow the money or you follow the politics on this one.
Well, I think the American people are going to wake up. I think they are beginning to wake up. I see a major reaction against this trans movement. The boycotts are really hurting various stores who are, the Budweiser effect, backing off. The woke agenda is really a very small, it unfortunately has captured a generation in the schools, but it's a neo-Marxist cultural Maoist objective. My next book in this trilogy, which the climate science is the first, will cover that. I'm writing a massive amount right now. I'll be 77 this year. I thank God for the time I've had on Earth, and I'll have, God willing, some more. But I'd like to get things in print so that I've left some legacy and some words that will be maybe more appreciated even after I'm gone. But I want to get you to understand the importance of reading, not just on the internet, but take time and actually read a book, get deeply into a subject, educate yourself onto some of the science involved and some of the truth. I'm focusing on the truth, not on this invented reality of this self-glorification of whatever you want to be, whatever gender you want to be, whatever, make up whatever reality you want to make up, and we've all got to accept it. That is self-destructive nonsense, and we've got to quit it. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Tuesday. It's May 30th, 2023. This is The Truth Central, thetruthcentral.com. We're broadcasting every weekday, with the exception of holidays like yesterday, Memorial Day. But we're, in the end, God always wins. And as difficult as some of this reporting is, God will win here too. We may have to go through some very tough times. We may need, in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, to get down on our knees and repent for our sins of letting the society go secular, letting God be taken out of the schools and the public square. We've got to get back to understanding that our purpose here is spiritual and that God rules, not Satan. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow, The Truth Central. God bless.